TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, James Athey, Senior Investment Manager at Aberdeen Asset Management, joins us live from Westminster, where my co-anchor Roger Hearing is tracking all the action. Pound hitting a 2016 low. Lots of action.
Market Insight from Bloomberg's Brightest.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzzed is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Withum Smith & Brown's digital services team has the experience and technical expertise to help your employees share information, collaborate effectively, and get the data they need no matter where they work. With expertise in Microsoft Cloud technology, Withum's digital specialists can help upgrade intranets, modernize your ERP and CRM systems, cloud-based systems, and so much more. Upgrade your legacy system and join the digital transformation revolution. Visit digital.withum.com to connect with their experts. That's digital.withum.com.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
James, at Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our Red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try Click and Collect. Just go to Tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try Click and Collect at Tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the... Every Tuesday at KFC. Every Tuesday from August 12th to September 3rd at participating restaurants subject to availability.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
I didn't choose you. You chose me. When you broke from the crowd and pawed at my knee, soon you'll be feeling right at home. You'll be a bit unsure, but you're free to roam. What's good to chew? What's nice to nibble? Wet food, dry food, tin food, kibble? You might sometimes be cheeky, not always wise, but I know I found love in those puppy dog eyes. Join the free VIP Puppy Club from Pets at Home for advice and exclusive offers, including 10% off your first shop in store. Visit petsathome.com/puppy club or join in store. T's and C's apply.
Did you know there's an ethical bank that takes care of your money and the world around you? Your money is powerful. The impact it has and where you choose to bank has never been more important. We're Triodos Bank. We're completely open about how we use your money, so you can see for yourself the positive impact it has for people and the planet. Join a community of like-minded people, making the world a better place. Follow your heart. Use your head. Join Triodos Bank.
Strength and things. Strength and things. Strength and things. Strings and things. Strings and things and strings and things. Strings and things. Strings and things.
Now there's a whole range of strings and things called strings and things, including cheese strings, yollies, and new cheese shapes. Find them all in the cheese and yogurt aisle.
Strings and things.
Make sure you're uni-ready with our huge range of practical essentials and home-from-home comforts and get 10% off for a limited time. T's and C's and exclusions apply. Dunelm, the home of homes.
Smouldering, slinky, seductive, streamlined, spellbinding. Ever notice how some of the most alluring descriptions seem to begin with the letter S? So perhaps it's no coincidence that S-Line, Audi's most stylish trim, does too. Take the A3 Sportback S-Line. With its added standout, there's another one, details, it's pure Audi. Just even more sporty, stealthy, sleek, striking, swish, sublime, sultry, swoony. The supremely stylish Audi A3 Sportback S-Line. Test drive yours at West London Audi or search Audi S-Line. Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Naira Chahich with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we're 47 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, and we are seeing some red on the screen in terms of European equities. The Stock 600 trading lower by 0.4%, so snapping 3 days of gains. Across regional benchmarks, you're seeing that reflected as well. CAC 40 down 0.4%, DAX down by the same. Bit of weakness on the IBEX, FTSE MIB flat, FTSE 100 flat as well, which could have something to do with the pound weakness we're seeing in today's session. The pound hitting a 2016 low against the dollar. Taking a look at that cable rate, we trade at 119.67, down 0.8%. 5 days of declines. Euro sterling is also reflecting pound weakness. Euro sterling trading at 91.40, so the euro higher by 0.5% against the pound. But the euro against the dollar hitting quite a low today, a 2017 low. Also seeing strength in the dollar overall. The Bloomberg Dollar Index hitting a 2017 high. The dollar strength is down to general bids for some safe haven assets on concerns around trade. Speaking of safe havens, the 10-year Treasury yield lower by 2.5 basis points, 147 handle. The 10-year gilt yield has hit a record low in today's session, hitting 34 basis points, down 7 basis points. 10-year Bund yield also at a record low, negative 73, as is the 10-year BTP yield, record low, dropping below 90 basis points, lower by 7 basis points. So a lot of risk off in today's session. Taking a look at US futures, US markets reopening after Labor Day. We're seeing those weaker. S&P 500 futures down almost 0.8%. NASDAQ futures lower by 0.9%. Dow futures lower by 0.8% as well. So a lot of caution across assets coming into these markets. The yen is the best performing G10 currency, up 0.2% against the dollar. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Naira, thank you. Iran is warning it's prepared to step away from the 2015 nuclear deal if Europe doesn't come up with new terms by the end of this week. Iran has set a Friday deadline for Germany, France and the UK to offer a feasible way for it to sidestep US sanctions and continue selling oil on the global market. Top diplomats are heading for Paris and Moscow for talks on the issue in coming days. South Africa has been hit by an outbreak of xenophobic violence in Johannesburg. 50 mainly foreign-owned shops and businesses were looted and torched in the central business district. That was yesterday. The attacks come ahead of the beginning of the African edition of the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. And Elton John's glittering performances are celebrated in the new stamp selection. The rock legend features on a new set of Royal Mail stamps to celebrate his contribution to music. He's only the second individual music artist to be given such an honor, with David Bowie featuring in 2017. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 20 nearly 700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Oh, what a great story, Leanne. I mean, what qualifies somebody to be on the stamps? Is it the number of platinum albums, or?
Do you know what, Naira? I don't know, but I'm going to just say one thing about Elton John. Can you remember a decade in your life?
Playing his music there?
They are. We can hear a little bit of Elton John. Is this Tiny Dancer?
Candle in the Wind is the song I remember most of all.
This is Tiny Dancer, and I love this song. But what I'm saying is that I've never lived a decade in my life without having Elton John in it.
Oh my goodness,
on the radio.
Wow.
So we love Elton John and all his glamorous glasses.
Well, one person who certainly will remember Elton John, whether he's a fan or not, I'm not sure. But Roger Hearing, my co-anchor, is in Westminster this morning. And let's continue our coverage from there. Roger, great to have you with us still. Are you an Elton John fan? Is it James Athey who sat there with you?
Well, we both are, I think, just from judging from James's views. But yes, I was just thinking perhaps the appropriate song today might be "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road," considering what's happening on the market, certainly as far as sterling is concerned. Anyway, but yes, so we're down here outside Parliament this morning. Obviously, a very key moment when we know that the MPs are gathering, probably to put through some legislation tonight the government won't like, and might be pushing us towards a general election as soon as October the 14th. Well, joining me here down on the green is James Athey, Aberdeen Mass Asset Management Senior Investment Manager. James, thank you for being with us, and welcome to you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're in a position where strange things are happening. We're seeing a lot of trouble with sterling dropping quite dramatically, but very interestingly, gilts seem to be, well, there seems to be a rush to gilts. It's quite weird. The yield is dropping rapidly. What's going on?
Yeah, sure thing. We proposed Saturday night's all right for fighting as an Elton John tune, which might be Tuesday
night, the way things are going
exactly.
here.
I mean, essentially, gilts are not a credit. There has been talk periodically through this post-referendum period where people sort of assumed that there would be this flight away from UK assets in general. I think realistically, that's not the ultimate driving force, shall we say. First and foremost, we need to look at what the economic impact, the perceived economic impact, and therefore the monetary policy impact. And therefore you see the price of sterling gilt yields dropping, I think, to reflect the fact that the longer this drags on, the more and more the uncertainty weighs on the business investment side of the economy, and that's just having a negative impact across the piece. And just like the US, the consumer has been able to keep things ticking along, but I don't think anybody believes that can continue forever. So I don't think it's hugely surprising to see gilt yields falling. For me, the interesting thing is that 18 months ago, whenever there was the merest possibility that we might be heading to an outcome which was less hard or not even a Brexit at all, we actually saw a bit of relief. And I would say that a general election opens that door a little bit, but we're still seeing a pretty negative reaction from sterling and falling gilt yields.
So how possible is it, James? Good morning, by the way, and great to have you at Westminster. How possible is it that the 10-year gilt yield could turn negative? Citi was saying earlier this week that it could on a no-deal Brexit, but also with the general theme of secular stagnation and where bond yields are going globally.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I definitely don't think the Bank of England wants to take rates negative, and for that reason I think it's very difficult for 10-year gilt yields to go negative, especially given that we are still talking about economy with fairly high inflation as a general rule, and certainly a lot of imported inflation, which is driven by the currency, and therefore if we see a big drop in sterling and a drop in sterling versus the euro, where we still import a lot of the goods that make up the CPI basket, to me that's inflationary in the short term, and seeing incredibly negative nominal gilt yields would look a rather strange situation for the market to be in. So I don't discount it. I think it would have to be in an inverted yield curve scenario, because I don't think that the bank wants to take rates below zero at all.
And what about UK equities? What are you feeling about that now?
Great about risk assets in general globally, because essentially I think that we've seen the best of it in this economic cycle, and this is not new information really. We have really not much policy room to deal with the next downturn, and we do have a heck of a huge burden from the amount of debt that's been created in the last 10 or 20 years. So I don't feel great about risk assets scenario. It's difficult to feel great about UK risk assets for obvious reasons.
Yeah, James, I mean, I've been wondering myself when equity markets are going to wake up to what bond markets are pricing, but the drop that we've seen in yields globally has surprised many. Do you think that the duration trade has gone too far now?
It's a really tough one because, if you were to just fly down from space and look at yields, you'd say, of course, they've gone way too far. But we have to sort of put it in context. I think even when economies were growing at 2 and 3% with 2% inflation on top of that, in a new world, we were seeing 10-year yields at 5%, because essentially you would look at the nominal rate of growth and say, well, if this is in any way sustainable medium term, nominal yields should reflect that, and we didn't see that at all. So you have to recognise there are lots of other things going on, and given the best of it economically, to me it's not a surprise that yields are falling dramatically. Actually, as you've said yourself, Nair, if you look at markets, they appear to be pricing an entirely different future, which is not unusual for equities versus bonds. I'll try and leave my cynicism aside as a bond guy, really, but if equities had declined 10 or 15% from here, and I think that's small if we go into recession, what are bond yields going to do in that environment? So further into the future, when we start digging into the policy toolkit and plucking out what I think are going to be some quite scary looking and experimental policies, you don't necessarily want to be owning 0% 10-year yields in that environment, but for the sort of more immediate future where there is a more traditional policy response and economic weakness, I think it's fair to say that the duration shade still has room to run.
Well, looking further towards the global picture and all this, and obviously the other big headline of the day is the issue between the US and China in terms of even knowing what they're going to talk about when they have these talks, if they do. How are you reading, how are you pricing in the prospects of any kind of movement on that front at all?
Well, essentially now I'm not. I was actually pretty bullish that there would be a deal done if we go back, it's probably 9 months or more. But I think that moment in time where China essentially reneged on all the things that had been agreed up to that point, which were actually the easy bits, at that point I think it dramatically changed, the situation dramatically changed, and now I think it's very difficult for everybody to get back and even get back to that place, and at that stage we hadn't even dealt with the tricky issues, which is things like IP and the enforcement of any agreement. So to me it looks like China is now sort of rolling the dice on the presidential election, and they don't really want to negotiate properly at this juncture, and so I think unfortunately that trade tension is here to stay.
James Athey, great to have you with us.
James, thanks very much. Sorry. James, thanks very much indeed for being with us. That's James Athey, Aberdeen Asset Management Senior Investment Manager, sitting with me here outside Parliament on a very momentous day, probably for the UK economy as well as UK politics. We'll be reporting far more on this, of course, on Daybreak Europe. This is Roger Hearing in Parliament outside Westminster, and this is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. But I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
From London, I'm Caroline Hepker.
And from Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So a very exciting day today, Matt. Will it be a no-deal Brexit or a general election? We've got this crunch vote this evening in Parliament that pits the anti-no-deal Brexit lawmakers against the Prime Minister. He's only 4 weeks into the job.
Yeah, it looks like the markets are concerned that it could be a no-deal Brexit. We see so many superlatives in the markets, just crazy. Let's take a look at some of the assets here. First off, the pound. In dollar terms, it's dropped to below 120, which if it holds there, if it closes at the level that we see it right now, it would be the lowest close since 1985. Right now, it's at the lowest intraday level that we've seen since October of 2016, I believe. 119.79 is where I see it trading. It's been as low as 119.59. It isn't as low in other terms. For example, if you look at euro sterling right now, we're only looking at 91 cents and change. It's been at 93 pence just a month ago. And the low level there, the flash crash levels post-Brexit were 94.5. So we're not really close to that right now. We see a lot of other superlatives in rates as well. Gilts are at an all-time low. Right now, gilts are yielding just 36, even less than 36 basis points. So they've never yielded so little. We see the same lows on Bunds right now, yielding negative 74 basis points. We see all-time lows in BTPs, yielding only less than 91 basis points. So it's really interesting to see the market moves today. We also see some pretty interesting moves in equity indexes. They're down, all of them, I was going to say except for the FTSE, but now the FTSE has turned down as well. So European equity indexes are all down, with the FTSE following suit, finally down just 0.1%, but nevertheless a red arrow. And if you take a look at U.S. futures, they're also deep in the red. NASDAQ futures are down more than 1%. S&P and Dow futures are down about 8 or 0.9%. So it looks all set to be a risk-off session today, with the yen gaining strength against the dollar at 106 even, and gold rising to 15.32 a troy ounce.
Okay, so those are the markets. Let's cross over now live to Roger Hearing, who is outside Parliament for us and has been all morning. Roger, it is going to be a very interesting day today. To misquote a former Prime Minister, a week a day is a long time in British politics. What are we expecting today?
Well, yes, good morning, Carol. I think a few hours are a long time in politics here at the moment. It's been an extraordinary lead up to this, and this is going to be a day of high drama and great uncertainty. There are very few occasions in British politics, really, when you can be absolutely unsure of an outcome. But I think tonight we really aren't. There's the vote that's going to be going on in Parliament in the next few hours, a vote on a motion to stop Boris Johnson from being able to carry through Brexit on October the 31st without a deal, delaying it, in fact, till January the 31st. The thinking is that will go through, despite the fact that it's against government policy, something highly unusual in Parliament. And then Boris Johnson said, well, yes, there's going to be an election if that happens. But again, he has to win a vote on that to have an election. And although the Labour Party has said they're very much in favour of an election, they've been saying that for a long, long time now, some people say, actually, it's not good for them. In fact, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair said it was an elephant trap because, of course, once you're out into the election, you just don't know what you're going to come up with, as, of course, the previous Prime Minister, Theresa May, found to her cost just a couple of years ago. And that, in some ways, is what led to this whole disaster.
It certainly is, Roger, looking like the market is pricing in a no-deal Brexit. I mean, to see sterling drop this low, I had some guests earlier saying if there is an election, it's bullish sterling because if Johnson wins, then he has a stronger mandate to make a deal with the European Union. If he loses, his opponents will put off Brexit forever. But it doesn't look like the market's reading it that way with such weakness in the pound.
It's really weird, man, actually. I mean, the gilts thing is very strange. Again, gilt yields dropping quite a lot. And what does that signify? We've been talking just now to a colleague here who was suggesting that may have reasons to do with perhaps people just wanting certainty in some way, and gilt still seeming like a safe bet in these highly uncertain terms. But yeah, I mean, clearly there's a huge economic aspect to all this. And unless or until there's some kind of direction forward, it's going to be very hard for the UK economy, I think, to feel in any way strengthened or in any way confident.
So, Bloomberg Radio anchor Roger Hearing there. And look, Matt, we've only got 58 days to go until Brexit. We're really in the eye of the storm. Britain continuing to tear itself apart, basically, about this Brexit question. And I want to pick up the idea of the falling pound and gilt yields with our guest this morning. In the London studio with me now is Viraj Patel, FX and global market strategist at Arkira. We're seeing the pound inching steadily lower. How much further do you think it could go? At least we have the options are clearer. It's either no deal or an election. At least that is some certainty.
Yeah, I think I'll give a bit of insight into how anyone could view the pound over the past 3 years. There's two factors that always drive it. One, the short-term uncertainty, and two, the Brexit endgame. Mm-hmm. And right now, especially over summer, both have been outright negatives for the pound. No one has a clear path of what the next couple of months look like, and nobody really knows what the end game is, but that's been inching towards a no-deal Brexit. I think things could change massively on both fronts over the next couple of weeks. We may get some sequencing, right? There could be, election or clarity and stuff like that, that basically sees some of the shorts squeezed out because there's just a neutralization of risks and maybe two-way risks are put back on the table. And the end game itself is going to be in the hands of Parliament, right? Whether they can effectively push or kick the can down the road when it comes to no deal. And that takes the immediate first-order factor of the UK crashing out of the EU on the 31st of October off the table. So look, in the short term, there's a strong case that you could see a squeeze. I always look at the positioning of leverage funds, extreme shorts. That to me is a red flag, chasing sterling much lower in the short term. After that, it's fair game. All bets are off the table, and who knows what happens in an election or sort of what the Brexit endgame is. But we're back to sort of maybe seeing it less as a one-way traffic towards sliding out of the EU, and I think that momentum seems to be sort of on its last legs, at least in sort of when we look at sort of the euro pound. I think that's important. Cable is kind of a dollar story as well. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't ignore that, but just having a second order effect on euro pound, that seems to be failing to massively inch higher going forward. So it suggests that this isn't just a no deal Brexit story.
So does that mean you want to buy the pound at these levels in order to play that short squeeze?
So I think there's two stories here. You're either a sell on rallies because you think the Brexit endgame doesn't get much clearer here. We're just slipping out of the EU at some point, or you're buy on dips because you're a value player and you think actually the endgame takes you towards some sort of value realization that the UK won't leave the EU in a disorderly manner. So it's one or the other. And I think right now, I just look at the positioning, and I think, we'll go back to historic lows when we've got to this levels. We've seen some short squeezes higher in sterling. It just makes me nervous at chasing fresh downside risks here and adding to fresh shorts at these levels. Okay, I mean, when it comes to gilts, it's also a similar picture, isn't it? It's the UK domestic story versus the global easing story. We're at 37 basis points for benchmark 10-year Treasury yields. And also, I note that tomorrow you've got Mark Carney actually speaking to the Treasury Select Committee, talking to lawmakers along with other officials. So that's like the last chance for him to talk about Brexit before the October 31st deadline, if that is still in play or not. We shall see. So what is your view then in terms of gilt yields and how they fare? So I think when I look at sort of the correlations between sterling gilt yields and, say, domestic stocks that are most sensitive to Brexit, definitely there seems to be that sort of Brexit premium priced in. But gilts it's not the same sort of correlation that we saw in 2016 where the pound was moving lower and gilt yields were moving higher. Partly the global easing story, partly because actually the topside inflation risk from a weaker sterling feeding through into imported inflation, it's not just one way. Like, I think we saw that pass-through effect has not been as dramatic as maybe was the case. Back in 2016, there was an only limited amount of pass-through that sterling had on imported inflation. So I think when you look at it from a bond perspective, and we learned from that episode and think that actually the global factor outweighs the domestic risks, and when you don't have massive stagflationary pressures or topside inflation risks, it doesn't make any sense to sort of be short gilts down at these levels when you've got a wave of liquidity hitting the market.
Viraj, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time on TV with me and here on radio as well. Viraj Patel is FX and global macro strategist at Arcara.
Okay, let's get all the latest now. In global news headlines, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. In Hong Kong, Chief Executive Carrie Lam has denied reports she asked for China's permission to quit.
I have never tendered a resignation to the Central People's Government. I have not even contemplated to discuss a resignation with the Central People's Government. The choice of not resigning is my own choice.
Lam denounced the leak of audio from her meeting with business leaders. Earlier, Reuters reported on the recording saying Lam discussed quitting, but at the briefing she clarified she's committed to Hong Kong. Chinese and US officials are struggling to agree on a schedule for talks aimed at ending the trade war. The date for a visit by Chinese officials to Washington still hasn't been set. Bloomberg's learned that Washington rejected Beijing's request to delay tariffs that took place over the weekend. At least 5 people have been killed in the northern Bahamas as Hurricane Dorian batters the country. Top winds have fallen to 125 miles an hour, making it a Category 3 hurricane as it heads towards the U.S. East Coast. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says people must not ignore the warnings.
If you're ordered to evacuate, you need to do that from Palm Beach County all the way up to Nassau. The Florida-Georgia border, all those coastal counties have issued evacuation orders, and it's important that residents heed those calls.
And heading to Europe, whether Italy gets a new 5-star Democrat coalition is riding partly on an online vote. According to the certifier, the ballot is a bit like voting on the X Factor. Bloomberg's John Filane reports.
5-star supporters get a chance Tuesday to back or reject the new alliance. For 5-star, this is direct democracy. Such votes have usually backed the leadership's line, but both 5-star and Democrat officials are keeping their fingers crossed. In Rome, John Filane, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much for that world news update, Leanne. Now, breaking on the Bloomberg terminal at the moment, some Huawei lines, Matt. Huawei says that the US government is trying to disrupt its normal operations. It says in an emailed statement that the US instructed law enforcement to threaten its workers. Huawei saying that the US has launched cyber attacks against its systems. Again, an emailed statement, no US response, obviously, but that's breaking on the Bloomberg.
Yeah, interesting to follow this because it's tied obviously so closely to the U.S.-China trade war that drives markets around the world outside of the U.K., of course. Well, in the U.K. as well. I think you make an argument that the trade war has a big effect on a lot of British stocks, too. It's just that with this weakening pound, it tends to distort things a little bit. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we cross over to Milan to hear just how U.K. politics is making Italy look like a beacon of stability. This is Bloomberg.
Where do you start your business day? Tokyo, London?
The art and antiques world is constantly evolving. Trends come and go. Fashions change. But the one constant is exquisite 18th century English furniture. Always in good taste, always in style. In business for 50 years, Hyde Park Antiques showcases the most extensive and finest inventory of pure 18th and early 19th century English furniture on either side of the Atlantic. Simply set foot in our 20,000 square foot gallery and you're transported to another time. Living with antiques brings a feeling of continuity with the graciousness of the past and the sense of assurance into the future. Hyde Park Antiques acquires antique furniture from estates and from across the globe. No reproductions. Each piece is absolutely genuine and of the period represented. See our stunning collection online at HydeParkAntiques.com. That's HydeParkAntiques.com. Hyde Park Antiques, where good taste never goes out of fashion.
Today, fixed income demands more than a fixed approach. It means staying ahead of ever-changing markets, making the most of traditional strategies, but also looking beyond them. Not just finding opportunities for investors, but creating them. We didn't invent fixed income, but we reinvent it every day. PIMCO. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Here's Rishad Salamat.
Let's get over to Singapore. We can get to UBS Wealth Management Executive Director for Commodities and FX, Wayne Gordon. Wayne, great to see you. Let's just quickly look at what's going on in the commodities complex with this backdrop of this trade war. I'm going to start off with iron ore out of all of them, because iron ore had an awful August. It's come back. Is it in any way connected with what's going on with regards to the spat between Beijing and Washington?
Look, I think it'd be difficult to say, Roosh, that the trade issues have not had some impact on broader growth estimates. As an example, UBS has cut its China GDP numbers again yesterday from 6.1% for this year to 6% for this year, and then we now expect around the 5.5% growth for next year. So clearly growth is, the trade war is having an impact on growth. We think trade is contributing to a downgrade of about 40 basis points for growth over the next 12 months. So that's clearly impacting steel as well. The point I think more for iron ore is that Vale has shown that it can recover supplies. Supplies have started to drip back into the market in Q3.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hebger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So Britain potentially faces its third election in just 4 years. We have sterling weakening at the moment against the dollar. We are at 1.1993. So we're weaker 0.6%. That means the weakest since about October 2016 on concerns about a no-deal Brexit versus an election. We may only have two choices, but it's pretty binary. We're down 4 basis points on gilt yields, and in terms of the FTSE 100, we're also in negative territory, but only down 0.1%. The broader indexes here in Europe, Euro Stoxx 600, for example, down 0.3%. We're negative across the board. Xetra DAX weaker 0.3%. There is uncertainty, of course, about when the US and China will actually agree a timetable for trade talks. Speaking of America, if you're back from the Labor Day holiday, hope you had a good time, because US futures, S&P 500 E-mini futures are weaker, down 0.6%. And as for US benchmark Treasury yields, 1.48%, so down almost 2 basis points this morning. And in terms of gold, which has been a favourite of late, we're up again another 0.1% this morning, 1,531, as WTI drops by 1.2%, $54.43 the barrel. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. A total of 25 bodies have now been found after a diving boat caught fire off Southern California. 9 people are still missing following the blaze off the coast of Santa Cruz yesterday. Authorities say they will continue to search for them, but are prepared for the worst outcome. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro will miss a planned summit on the fires ravaging the Amazon rainforest as he prepares for surgery, an aide has said. The operation will be his 4th after he was stabbed in the stomach during his presidential election election campaign back in 2018. More than 80,000 fires have broken out in the Amazon rainforest this year alone. And it's claimed more than 2/3 of women aged 18 to 30 have lost confidence in politicians over the last year. Research by the Young Women's Trust, which supports those on low or no pay, also found many feel ignored. The charity is calling for the government to level the playing field between investment in men's training and women's. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Time to check in with our Bloomberg Opinion columnist. Today we're joined by Ferdinando Giuliano, who's written an open letter to the UK asking Britain, where did it all go so wrong? Ferdinando, thanks so much for joining us. Is it now you think that is the time for this letter, or maybe rather at the end of June in 2016?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I still think that, when the referendum happened, yes, many of us in the rest of Europe were shocked, surprised, but at the end of the day, we respected the will of the British people. That was, the only thing one could do, and hoped for this process, the process of leaving the EU, would happen smoothly. And most importantly, in a democratic fashion. But what's happened since over the last 3 years, I think, has been a real shock to all of us who've learned to love, cherish, and admire Britain and its democracy. I think it's been very shambolic.
I've got skin in this game, haven't I? You can tell from my accent, but this is a kind of classic political situation in the UK. I mean, we've often had these clashes. I mean, under John Major, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, these kind of battles, and even within the Conservative Party, this issue is just so divisive. The issue of how close the UK wants to be to Europe.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, that's a never-ending story which has been going on for 50 years. And you're right to point out to the divisions within the Conservative Party. But I still think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks with this, I thought, extraordinary decision by Boris Johnson to essentially, limit the possibility of Westminster to discuss this issue as it should be doing, and the protests.
Well, they haven't discussed it enough.
Well, I think
2.5 years, not enough time.
Well, but the change of government and what this government is planning to do, I think it's quite a dramatic change. I mean, frankly, the direction the country is taking is a very different direction from the one most MPs have in mind, and certainly there is no sign that when people voted for Brexit, they had the Boris Johnson idea of Brexit in mind.
Ferdinando, he was the main campaigner for Brexit. I mean, certainly the people who voted for Brexit had Boris Johnson's idea of Brexit in mind. The problem here is that they voted to leave the EU, and the European Union then said you can't leave.
I think you're oversimplifying on this point. I don't think there is any sign that people have voted for a no-deal Brexit. I don't think that can be said at all.
They voted to leave the European Union, and now the EU is saying you can't leave. And they've been saying this, right?
The EU
as long as the backstop is...
That's again another misrepresentation of what's going on. The EU is just saying, these are the rules. If you want to engage with us, you have to engage it in a way which respects what the rest of the EU has agreed. And I think that's a very sensible point. I mean,
I think the other issue with this, though, that does go to the kind of the point that you've been making, is that Europe, I feel, did not make its case at a kind of national level strongly enough in some ways. And I think this is part of the problem, isn't it, with the kind of political system within the EU, that it's a sort of it's a bureaucracy that sits above the national governments, and that's a very tricky situation to handle.
I mean, it is an incomplete union, and I think especially when it comes down to the Eurozone, which obviously the UK is not part of, there are still structures which are missing. But I think there is a chicken and egg problem in a way, because many governments at the moment don't want to, in a way, give up those prerogatives which would be needed would be needed to make the union work and make it more democratic.
It seems well, it's an interesting issue. Obviously, if the UK can debate it for 3.5 years without coming up with a solution, we're certainly not going to either. In any case, fantastic column, Ferdinando Giuliano there from the Bloomberg Opinion team. You can read his column by typing OPIN-GO on your terminal.
Yeah, always thought-provoking. Right, straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Following Dorian, the deadly hurricane continues striking the Bahamas. The winds are weakening. We'll discuss that story next. This is Bloomberg.
Every day, 149,000 CF.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The NFL does not allow its players to use a product with CBD that many users say eases their pain. CBD is the product in cannabis that has removed THC, the ingredient that gets people high. We asked Terrell Davis, former running back with the Denver Broncos, when will the NFL change its mind on CBD?
Well, to this point, I think what they're doing, and I've spoken to them, it's a process for them. And the process is that they have to look at it and do studies on the product to make sure that it has the efficacies of it, to see if there's any side effects. And so they want to do their own studies to make sure that when they say, okay, the thumbs up or green light, that they can stand by the product. Or the ingredient. And so that's where they are now. It's going to be a process.
Davis, like former Patriots tight end Rob Gronkowski, are investors in products with CBD. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change. Now, there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At Eisner-Amper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, Principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at eisneramper.com/family.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try Click and Collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try Click and Collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm getting strawberry notes and a flutter of sweetness without adding sugar. Clever. It is. Yazoo Kids uses a lactose-reduced milk that enhances flavour without adding sugar or artificial sweeteners. Milky deliciousness and packed full of goodness. Very clever. Strawberry Yazoo Kids supports change for life. Yazoo, shake it up! Contains naturally occurring sugars. Milk is a source of calcium, which is needed for the maintenance of normal bones.
Make sure you're uni-ready with our huge range of practical essentials and home-from-home comforts and get 10% off for a limited time. T's and C's and exclusions apply. Dunelm, the home of homes.
The biggest cat in the world was longer than a cricket bat.
Think that's big? Tonight, the Euro Millions jackpot is an enormous £114 million. 114 million! Now that's big.
Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Amazing starts here.
Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German capital of Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Caroline, we have seen some pretty incredible moves today, but we're seeing a little bit of a bounce back now. For example, the pound had dropped below $1.20 for the first time since early 2017, dropping to a 2016 intraday low. It's now bouncing back up a little bit at 120.02, and we do see a lot of the moves. The drop, for example, in U.S. Treasury yields coming back. 147.75 is, by the way, where we are on treasuries. We are supposed to, or we are awaiting right now, some UK data. I'm looking at the United Kingdom on my eco function to see where sales are like for like year over year sales. It looks like it was a drop in August. 0.5%. We were looking for a gain of 0.5%. So missing the survey and actually falling in those terms. And we also saw UK construction right now, the CIPS, market CIPS, UK construction PMI at 45, and we were looking for 46.5. So as my friend Richard Jones from the MLive blog told me earlier, the data is pretty weak in terms of what we see coming out of the UK.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, look, this is after the manufacturing sector shrank in August. So, yeah, this is closely watched. And retail sales also really not great from that British Retail Consortium survey also. So, yeah, interesting to see the data behind. It's not just political uncertainty, it's also the data, isn't it? But look, I want to talk about another major issue. It's the latest on the Hurricane Dorian. The storm is actually still stalled over the Bahamas, battering the island chain. Now, the top winds have fallen to 125 miles an hour, making it a Category 3 hurricane, but forecasters are looking for signs that it's ready to turn north. And I want to bring in this morning Bloomberg editor Derek Wallbank. Derek, you are really fascinating because you've got so much experience with hurricanes, what you've lived through, ridden through more than a dozen storms, even survived a Category 5 storm, back in 1992. And tell us what you think of this latest one. Derek, I'm hoping you're there.
I don't think we have Derek.
No, maybe not.
All right, well, we'll get back to Derek in a little bit. Why don't I quickly just take us through all the data here so we can see what's going on in terms of markets and...
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, Derek, you are there. All right, listen, let's kill Derek's mic for a second. I'm going to go through the markets, and then we'll get back to Derek. Right now, we're looking at the FTSE 100 currently down. It was up earlier with the weakness in the pound, but it's now falling 0.2%. The CAC 40 is down more than 0.5%, as is the DAX. So we have risk-off sentiment throughout Europe, and that's pervasive in the futures as well. Dow futures are down 0.8%, as are S&P 500 futures, and NASDAQ futures are down 1%. So it looks like we're going to have a drop as the U.S. comes back from their 3-day Labor Day weekend. In terms of the currencies, the yen is gaining against the dollar. You can only buy 106 yen for a dollar. And the euro is the other currency that I think is making a superlative move down to the lowest level since 2017. The euro in dollar terms trading at 109.43. Investors reaching for safety in gold at 1531.54 a troy ounce. And Brent crude continues to drop at $58.10 a barrel.
So that's a look at the markets. Let's get back to that story then about Hurricane Dorian, because I know that we've got Bloomberg editor Derek Warbank who is standing by for us. Look, this storm is really a shot across the bows, isn't it, in terms of the strength and the fact that it's hovering right over the Bahamas for a long time. What have you picked out as really the most troubling factor? Derek, are you there? Okay, so look, we'll try and come back to Derek another time. Yeah, maybe we're having some technical problems. I'm so sorry.
Well, I can tell you one thing. It's nothing to do with the hurricane.
No.
Thank goodness for that, because, Derek is far away from the hurricane out there in Singapore, so he's not getting hit. The storm is battering the Bahamas. The winds have weakened to 125 miles an hour. Remember, yesterday we saw it hit the Keys outside of the Bahamas at 220 miles an hour. Now it's down to a Category 3 hurricane. But the problem is, if it rises up the East Coast, you could see incredible damage to property and life, even at these levels. I mean, remember Superstorm Sandy from way back in, I think, 2012, caused a 4-day closure of the New York Stock Exchange. That hasn't happened since 9/11. So we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in damage and grave threat to human lives along the coast if it does hit Florida and rise up the east.
Okay, I'm going to try. Third time lucky. Derek, are you there? And can you hear me? No, okay, not to worry. Let's go in that case, Matt, to get all the latest in global news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
And we begin with a Bloomberg scoop. China and the US are struggling to agree on the schedule for the next round of trade talks. This after Washington rejected Beijing's request to delay tariffs that took effect over the weekend. The date for a visit of Chinese officials to the US hasn't been set, but that isn't necessarily a sign the talks won't happen. Moving here to the UK. The UK could be heading for its third election in just over 4 years. That's after Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he'd rather risk losing office than have his negotiations with the EU undermined.
I want everybody to know there are no circumstances in which I will ask Brussels to delay. We're leaving on the 31st of October, no ifs or buts. We will not accept any attempt to go back on our promises or scrub that referendum.
Johnson threatened to trigger a snap ballot if he loses a vote. That's in Parliament tonight. Opponents are trying to force him to delay Brexit until the end of January if he can't agree a deal with the EU. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is continuing his meetings with the European Union's incoming leaders in Brussels today. Bloomberg's Nikos Chrysoloros says he is hoping to put transatlantic ties on a fresh footing.
In July, Draghi issued a warning. If the economic situation gets worse, governments need to step in. Merkel's response has been hesitant. Germany will act as the situation warrants. But so far there is no need for stimulus, as the country isn't in crisis, she said. In Berlin, Birgit Janan, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And Iran is warning it's prepared to step away from the 2015 nuclear deal if Europe doesn't come up with new terms by the end of this week. Iran has set a Friday deadline for Germany, France and the UK to offer a feasible way for it to sidestep US sanctions and continue selling oil on the global market. Top diplomats are heading for Paris and Moscow for talks on the issue in the next coming days. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, with this morning's sports, here's Lewis Mason.
Defending champion Naomi Osaka is out of the US Open after losing in straight sets to Switzerland's Belinda Bencic. Joanna Konta will aim to become the first British woman since 1983 to reach the semi-final stage of the competition when she plays Alina Svitolina later. Bolton used the final day of the transfer window in the Football League to bring in 9 new players. Daryl Murphy, Chris O'Grady and Jake Wright are among the players arriving at the club who escaped liquidation last week. Before the deadline passed for European teams to make signings, Javier Hernandez left West Ham to sign a 3-year deal with Sevilla. Manchester United defender Matteo Darmian joined Italian side Parma, and Henrik Mkhitaryan went on loan to Roma from Arsenal. Celtic completed the signing of Greg Taylor before the Scottish deadline. He arrives from Kilmarnock on a 4-year deal.
Sports with Pete Fox. Pete?
120 games. 7-0 the final. The Rangers win it. Mets a 7-3 win over the Nationals. Noah Syndergaard striking out 10 for his 10th win, only allowing 3 hits over 7 innings. Rays walked off the Orioles 5-4 in 10 innings. Tennis from the U.S. Open on the men's side. Rafa Nadal, the 2 seed in 4 sets over the 22 seed Marin Cilic. Gael Monfils moves on in straight sets, and on the women's side, the 1 seed Naomi Osaka is done losing to Belinda Bencic in straight sets. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
So that's all the sports news. Now, we have more from Westminster this morning. Of course, it's going to be a day of high stakes because there is this contest between Boris Johnson and MPs who oppose a no-deal Brexit. We have a vote, Matt, later on this evening that is going to try to force through legislation to prevent the Prime Minister from going out on the 31st of October in terms of Brexit. Let's cross over now live to outside the UK Parliament and our Bloomberg Radio anchor Roger Herring, who is standing by. Very good morning to you, Roger.
Yes, very, very good morning to you, Caroline, from outside Parliament here on the Green, where much will be happening in the coming hours, not least a key vote in the House of Commons intended to stop Boris Johnson from taking Britain out of Europe without a deal. And with me here is Owen Smith, who's Labour MP, prominent Labour MP. Thanks very much for being with us. Very good morning to you.
And you?
Let me kick off by asking you, what do you expect to happen tonight? Do you think, first of all, there will be enough votes to get this piece of legislation passed?
My impression, although I don't know this for certain, Roger, is that yes, there will be sufficient votes for us to take control of the order paper and do what I think is Parliament acting in the interests of the country, which is put a brake on the executive and stop Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings from crashing us out of the European Union on a no deal that nobody voted for.
Well, let me take you one step beyond that, because Boris Johnson has said October the 14th, a general election, if he is defeated tonight. If that happens, well, it will only happen if there's 2/3 majority of the House allowing him to take an election. First of all, will the Labour Party back that?
Well, let's be clear, he hasn't said that there is going to be a general election on the 14th of October. He explicitly at Downing Street yesterday said, and I quote, "I don't want an election, you don't want an election." He then, immediately after he'd sat down, spoke brief, anonymously, that we'd have an election on October the 14th. So we don't know what Boris Johnson wants formally. However, the reality is Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings have clearly been setting this up from day one of his premiership, and their intention is to try and play the entire country for fools.
Okay, so what about the election?
And the Labour Party for fools by trying to sucker us into...
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores, booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the... Every Tuesday at KFC. Every Tuesday from August 12th to September 3rd at participating restaurants subject to availability.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, Get further. Faster. Better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin